We are now going to go straight into session 2 on new community resiliency initiatives in the region. And I would like to welcome up Nicole Iadevaia and Jennifer Codo-Salisbury as presenters for this session. Nicole Iadevaia is the Director of Research and Restoration at the Coastal and Heartland National Estuary Partnership. Nicole holds degrees in both ecology and biological anthropology from the University of Colorado. Jennifer Codo-Salisbury is the Executive Director of the Central Florida Regional Planning Council. She holds a Master's in Public Administration from the University of South Florida and is an AICP Certified Planner. Throughout their presentations, the Menti will be open for you to enter in questions, and with that, I'm going to turn it right over to Nicole to begin. Thank you.
Okay, so good morning all. As Jennifer mentioned, I am Nicole Iadevaia, presenting on behalf of the Coastal and Heartland National Estuary Partnership. And I'm excited today to share some updates on projects that are currently underway in your communities in Central and Southwest Florida. We are doing these projects in partnership with your cities, your counties, and many other entities that are working on sort of local planning initiatives in the region, such as Jennifer, who we'll hear from in just a minute. And, you know, this is all being done to protect critical infrastructure, to sort of aggregate all of this data we've been talking over the last few days, and think about what that means for impacts for the areas where we live. And, you know, our quality of life now and in the future, and how do we build for that moving forward. So with that, you know, as mentioned, we've heard a lot of really interesting science over the last few days, and, you know, from the experts about, you know, what's going on globally, regionally, statewide, and then just sort of whittling down to our region. You know, the rate at which this information is being gathered and shared has, you know, expanded exponentially, which is really exciting. And that's why it's important when we get together at events like this and we talk it through to understand what this looks like in our day-to-day lives, how this is going to be impacting us. So, you know, again, all of this is really important to be done at each of these scales. But the things that are going to affect us most immediately and directly are the things that are going to be happening in our local communities. These are going to be the things that are going to have a real impact on our day-to-day lives. And so we want to make sure we're sort of honing that all the way down to that local level, local community planning and projects, and informing those. And it's going to look a little bit different for each community, right? Capacities are going to vary, as well as hazards, and so the needs that are driven by those hazards. So I'm going to get into that in just a minute. First, I want to talk about something that we think is really interesting and exciting, is that investments in our future and in resiliency continue to be made across the United States and Florida and our region. You know, that is what's fueling a lot of this data collection that we've heard about. And you know, the investments are on both that data side, so, you know, collection of new types of information. The amount of satellite data and tools to analyze that has proliferated rapidly over the last few years. We've gotten, you know, higher detailed types of data, higher quality maps, and then also there's funding for digitizing existing information from local counties. You know, where are the county's lift stations? Where are their critical infrastructure facilities? What are the elevations of those? Because all of that type of information goes into these plans and really matters. So, you know, we just wanted to highlight that that is, you know, it's exciting that that's a driving force for these publicly accessible tools that even you and I can go and look at, but also we know are going to be used by our, you know, the planners that are putting together these initiatives. So on top of that, there is also funding for resiliency grants for planning and infrastructure projects. So it's like gathering all that data. We're looking at, you know, what are the elevations? Okay, so now what does that mean? We need to put it together into project plans. Where are we going to start? And designs. And so, you know, there are federal and regional investments being made, but there's also local investments in staff time. You know, these are your local county planners, these are your regional planning council folks that are doing this work. And so CHNEP funding is going to sort of supplement that. So we We have some funding from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And what we're doing is we're funneling that to each of the 10 counties in our region to supplement these efforts wherever they are needed, because again, each community is going to have its own unique needs. So I'm going to get into that in just a moment, because that's, kind of where the rubber meets the road and the part that I'm really excited to talk about. So, I just wanted to sort of tie it together too. So this is where the work of the NEP kind of works together with sort of these resiliency initiatives and community planning. We are natural resource focused. However, natural resources and healthy communities support one another and can actually supplement the efforts of each other. So we, again, are kind of crossing lots of, this is a map that kind of illustrates that, lots of jurisdictions, agencies, local governments are working with researchers, citizens, and resource managers across this enormous area, sort of at a regional watershed landscape scale, and bringing together this consensus-based science. Funding for research and restoration allows us to distribute the roles across the board. There's a lot of work to be done, and so we want to make sure we're amplifying one another's efforts and funding, and meeting both the needs of healthy communities and healthy ecosystems, which is, again, they're going to support one another, and I'll go into sort of how they can co-benefit one another on this slide. So coastal and wetland habitats can work to buffer some of the worst impacts of storm surge and flooding. A lot of the people that were here from Ian probably saw that mangrove fringe definitely helped capture some of that storm surge flooding. Green infrastructure, as we like to call it, can protect from erosion, so that means living shorelines. This might be trees along your canal, again, protect from erosion, which reduces flooding downstream. Improved water quality across the region also adds to our own quality of life, and it's a huge part of our economy. It leads to our outdoor economy, which is supporting, what's going on in our communities. And so again, we're trying to amplify one another's efforts on sort of that natural resource side, and also that sort of community planning side, because we are, we all are working together in this same area. We are living in our ecosystems, and they are supporting us, and so that's how we're tying that together with that work. And healthy ecosystems are resilient, and they support healthy and resilient communities for long term. So what does this look like in our approach? So first of all, like what we're doing today. We host annual summits, bring together the public, scientists, and elected leaders to talk about some of this great information and advance regional resiliency by convening meetings. It's also through funding support, and I'm going to get into this. It's assistance to each of our counties with their vulnerability assessment planning process in whatever the unique way that they need assistance is. Again, there's all these different funding sources and all these different capabilities, so that's working with these communities and saying, what do you need? Not coming top down, but going bottom up and meeting people where they're at. So it's, again, adapting for long-term capacity, but also quality of life right now. And then it's also through data sharing, collecting and aggregating some of this great data that we've been talking about today to better understand, shifts in our ecosystems, and compiling it all into one place for sort of a holistic management picture is what we are looking to do. So now this is the part that I get excited to talk about. This is where we're getting into the project side of it. So I'm going to give a couple examples of projects that have been going on this past year that are ongoing right now, and then just talk about where we're going to go with some of the projects in the future. So to start off, there's some of the counties where they decided they would like that funding assistance with their vulnerability assessment process. So that could be the data gathering, that could be development of their initial vulnerability assessment planning. And again, I just want to emphasize, local impacts will vary. Inland communities are going to be dealing with a lot more rainfall issues, but coastal communities are going to be looking at rainfall as well as tidal flooding and storm surge. And so kind of pulling that into the mix. But there's also going to be different capacity issues for each of those counties. They might have only one department for all of these things, or they might have multiple departments that need to be coordinated together, so it's going to look unique. But we also want to make sure we're cross-pollinating these ideas across the counties from these projects, and these funding sources, because we want to carry some of these lessons learned and take whatever's applicable and utilize it elsewhere. And that's why we're kind of talking through some of these things today, because maybe some of you are these resource managers and you'll be in the meeting today and you'll hear something that you like that you want to implement yourself. So it's, again, everybody, we are all kind of working towards a similar goal in the Central and Southwest Florida region of, protecting communities and understanding where we are vulnerable and figuring out how to move forward with improving those areas. But, so to get into specifics, I'm going to start off with Charlotte County, since that's where we're at today. So CHNEP is working with county staff to provide funding assistance for the initial steps of their vulnerability assessment process, which is, reviewing existing data, reviewing, so the critical asset data, that means, where are their critical infrastructure, that means hospitals, fire stations, emergency management buildings, that kind of thing. And if it's not in a map, pulling it into a digital map, it might be in a plan in somebody's desk, looking at the existing rainfall flood data, the existing storm surge data, and identifying data gaps, and again, trying to fill those as best as possible with the current funding source, and then maybe developing proposals for additional funding for even further improvements in the future. And, because we want to make sure that we are meeting the state guidance for that, and looking at existing models and determining, well, do we need to develop new models? I mean, there's new data every day, and we need to kind of be implementing these plans as we're improving on these plans day to day. So just getting the most information we can to get started now, essentially. And so what are some of the outcomes that we're looking for from this project, or some of the benefits that'll be coming out of this really soon here, is the county will have a better understanding of how coastal flooding impacts are going to look, and what they're going to mean for some of their critical infrastructure and assets. And also this project involved gathering some feedback from the community to hear areas of concern for them, areas that they wanted to prioritize that they've seen over the years. And this is going to help the county decide which adaptation strategies they want to start with. We have to start somewhere. There's limited time and funding for everything, so let's get started now, and what is the priority for that? And so the main outcome from this project that we are co-funding is going to be the development of a vulnerability assessment, which will kick off that decision-making process and support the various programs throughout each of the county, each of the departments, and some of the efforts that they need to be making. And then they can go forward and start to apply for funding to make their improvements or start their projects. Related to that, within Polk County, what we're doing is they are still in the process of developing their, again, that same vulnerability assessment that's going to kick off that process. And one of the items that they decided they would like additional funding for is to do more modeling to understand what the rainfall impacts are going to be in their area. So the baseline funding is looking at rainfall at that sort of 100-year storm level. And unfortunately, that graphic might be a little too small for you to read. So that looks like, what does that translate to in Polk County? That looks like about 10 inches on there. But they already know that they're going to see and have seen post-Hurricane Ian and post-Milton much more rainfall than that. So they wanted to do some additional rainfall modeling to understand the 200-year storm event, the 500-year storm event. What does the ground look like when you get a storm event like that and the ground is saturated because you had a storm hit in September and it's already been raining all summer? So these are going to, be realistic for, situations that they're already seeing. So we are working with them to fund that modeling. That is now complete. And the next step of it is doing data visualizations of what those results look like on critical county infrastructure. So this is an example wastewater treatment facility in Polk County that they're going to use these visuals for public education, for policymaker education, and to help them develop project plans for protecting these really important areas that are, impacting people's day-to-day lives post-storm events. And again, this is sort of illustrating the rainfall that they're already seeing in Polk County, and so this is actually giving them a decision-making tool to supplement what they already know, but now it's the information that they can use and go, okay, now we're gonna see this much flooding when we see this much rainfall, because you can say anecdotally, like, yeah, that got flooded, but if you don't have all of the information, all the tools to make those accurate decisions for plans, this is the next step to get you there. So this will be part of their baseline vulnerability assessment when that's completed. So moving on to the next phase of that is adaptation action area planning. So we are providing funding assistance for some counties to do that work in their areas. And again, same thing. There's going to be local impacts, there's going to be different local needs, but this is coordination with local community planners and agency staff to identify key areas of risk, because we can't do everything all at once, so where are our most impacted areas, and develop plans to take action right away for those areas. So, and Jennifer's going to talk about this a little bit, so I won't get into too much detail, but in Hardy, Highlands, and DeSoto counties, we are funding some of the development of adaptation action plan projects. So this is building off the baseline vulnerability assessment these counties have already created with the Regional Planning Council. It's building off the critical asset and flood data that they've already put together. And it involved doing public outreach to develop a list of prioritized areas in the public's view to help inform how we were going to prioritize areas. And then it was collaborating with those counties and the Regional Planning Council, who is working with them on a day-to-day basis to prioritize risk and where we would probably want to take action, where those counties will want to take action next, and develop plans that they can point to when they go to apply for grant funding and say, we have this plan that we've put together very carefully, and it's backed by sound science and decision making. And this is just an example of what that looked like. So we wanted to develop sort of a methodology that could be a plug and play. Maybe other counties can use this if they're not at that step yet, of how to prioritize things. Because we're not going to develop projects for every piece of critical infrastructure. We're going to be looking at infrastructure that will likely be impacted by flooding, and then places where the county can do projects. They can't do, something may be important, but it may not be county owned. So they can't develop a project for a privately owned building at this point. They want to start with buildings that are county owned. So that was sort of how we started with the prioritization, and we also wanted to fold in those areas of community concern. And so all of those, on that graphic there, all of those different aspects of, that can impact a piece, an asset, were taken into account, and then that helped inform the prioritization. And then there were areas, and that's a map there, there's an example map of Highlands County, for instance, of all of the different priority areas, which is like sort of groupings of these flooded assets and what those look like. And again, we still only, this plan involved selecting the top 3 of those, so prioritizing the top 3 and developing project plans for assets within those areas. And so this will prepare the county again for next steps to apply for grant funding and move forward to final design. And so an example design project that will come out of these projects that we're working on now is, for instance, Arcadia's wastewater treatment plant could be prioritized. This could include identifying components that are essential for its operation. That'll be part of the project. It could involve the elevation of critical equipment above projected flood levels. That's where getting that best available data comes in. And putting up perimeter barriers, such as levees and flood walls, combined with green infrastructure to manage stormwater and fortify those facilities. So that's what that'll look like, and it'll come with cost estimates as well. So it's really setting them up for next steps. So, coming soon to a county near you, that's just an example of some of the counties that we're working with now, but we are talking to all of the counties in our 10-county region about where we're going to be moving next steps over the next year, but hopefully next year we'll bring back sort of the final outcomes from these projects and some other projects as well, but we were really excited to share these ones with you all today. So I want to sort of wrap it up by, sharing a few big takeaway thoughts that we have on this is healthy ecosystems and smart planning can help us better cope with the stressors of flooding and storms and heat and all of those hazards that are going to be impacting us now and in the future. Storm events will have impacts, but this could be temporary, and a healthy system may recover more quickly. Continued capacity and funding support is needed to build for the future and for continued quality of life where we are now. And then for my practitioners in the room, here's just some sort of logistical takeaways that we've learned, throughout the 30-year experience of the CHNEP, which is, like to inform where we're going to go next. Weather and extreme events don't follow jurisdictional boundaries, and neither will these impacts. So addressing current issues and building capacity means a regional approach sometimes, and getting together like we're doing and working together on these things. Developing large-scale, developing large-scale and complex projects can be really heavy, and so working together to sort of amplify our effort, doing a multi-partner or phased approach can sometimes be the answer. And making the time and the space for collaboration is really important. I cannot emphasize this enough. If you have the capacity to build this into your projects, and what I mean by capacity is the money and time, do it, because you'll get better outcomes from it. Again, you'll be able to pull on resources from, reach out from your other regional collaborators and pull those in. Consensus-based decision-making is of the utmost importance when working towards agreed-upon outcomes. And, we want to continue these conversations to share new data and tools and lessons learned. And so we can continue to have public buy-in and policymaker buy-in for the work we're going to do in the future. And with that, I will turn it over to Jennifer to talk about next steps. Thank you all.
Oh my goodness, so Nicole is a tough speaker to follow. So many great presentations today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be before you. And there we go. All right, I'm Jennifer Codo-Salisbury. I'm with the Central Florida Regional Planning Council, and we serve DeSoto, Hardee, Highlands, Okeechobee, and Polk. And by raise of hands, is anyone from any of our 5 counties? All right, yeah, we got a winner. Okay, all right, good to see you all. Hey, we also work with Glades and Hendry, so our agency is the platform for the Heartland Regional Resiliency Coalition. So it's our 5 counties and then Glades and Hendry to the south. And just over the years, the Regional Planning Councils really formed in the 1960s and 1970s, really is that entity to come together to have our region talk. So as I continue on with my presentation, as we look at infrastructure, our major roadways, our major natural resources, as we look at rainfall, none of those things stop at local government lines. And when we're in the middle of a storm, the water doesn't stop between DeSoto and Hardee, for example. So we are great benefits as we talk across those jurisdictional lines. And as we have worked on resiliency and looking at the future and meeting with the community and looking at some of the dollars that go with it, not only does it have tremendous human impacts and impacts to our resources and infrastructure, but looking at some of the data from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, every dollar invested for resiliency, for example, in hardening our infrastructure, looking at our natural resources, that's $13 saved. So as we look at that long range and we look at our budgets and go, oh my goodness, because there's never enough money, that investment is well worth it. In our region, we have really continued to look at lessons learned. I know here in Southwest Florida, being ground zero for Ian, in our region, we felt that coming up through the Heartland. Arcadia was really part of our ground zero. And we went back and we looked, and from the year 2000 to 2023, and let's go ahead and add Helene and Milton in there, we've had over 20 natural disasters or extreme weather events, including hurricanes. And I originally came from up north, and my family always says, oh, you're in the middle of the state, y'all will be fine. No, we tend to be the crossroads for a number of these events. These are just some snapshots. You can see here from Hurricane Ian, the city of Wauchula wastewater treatment plant, that's in Hardee County. But this is what we saw during Ian. And this was really replicated. City of Arcadia, for example, as well. We have a number of wastewater treatment plants in the Peace River watershed. And this is another example. This was actually pre-Ian. This is the city of Bartow. This is right down the road from our office on Wilson Avenue. And actually, if you start at Main Street, our historic Main Street, go down to State Road 60, Wilson Avenue is a connector. And during the dry season, you can see we actually have markings on Wilson Avenue. The road goes under the railroad, and it says sometimes you can't tell if you're new to the area. You might have water that has built up from a rain event. And the top of that line is 7 feet, and that little red dot is much higher. So this was in a normal afternoon thunderstorm, pre any other storms. So when we look at resiliency and infrastructure, we're not just thinking about extreme weather, but looking at the capacity of our existing infrastructure and looking at different events and how those are impacted. And this is just looking post-Ian. Ian hit, I believe, on September 27th, and looking at our Peace River water, our river levels. Bartow on October 2nd was at 10.8 feet in the Peace River. In Zilphill Springs on September 29th, I mean, we were almost at 30 feet. And then in Arcadia on October 1st, almost 24 feet. So these are, real reality checks. We are grateful for the funding from the FDEP for the vulnerability assessments. We are working on flood modeling. It's a planning tool as we look at the 2040 and 2070 extreme rainfall events and looking at the impacts to critical infrastructure and how to look at solutions for capital improvements or relocation. And with that, when those vulnerability assessments are worked upon and completed, you're left with, okay, we see our impacts, we see those critical assets, a lot of what Nicole had just highlighted, our roads, our public utilities, our hospitals, some of our neighborhoods. Where do we go from there? So we are very grateful to have the partnership of the Coastal and Heartland National Estuary Partnership to really serve as a key partner as we look at that. So we're able to take that data from the vulnerability assessments and work with Highlands County, DeSoto County, and Hardee County on what's going to be that path forward. So we're able to take that data and work with CHNEP and also our consultants, Kimley Horn and NSAFE, to look at adaptation action plans and implementation strategies. And I know Nicole talked about that, but just a little bit of detail on what's involved in that. So we take the data from the extreme rainfall modeling, we look at those critical impacts, and then we go to the community. So if you ever look at a transportation model, it might be like, oh my goodness, all the traffic is going down 7th Avenue when you're looking at it in your office running the model. But you get out to the community, and sometimes folks are like, oh no, they're not going down 7th, they're cutting through my neighborhood. So it's a very different perspective when you get to the community and have that conversation. Well, we found the same is true with water flows. So the effort and what CHNEP has brought to the table, we've been able to go out to the communities, show the rainfall, the extreme events for the 2040 year and 2070. And what we've learned in some areas is, yes, there is some ponding, but really where we're seeing the challenges are in certain creeks or ditches, and some of that is now being reviewed. Is it maintenance? I know in my neighborhood, I hate to tell you this, but everybody blows their leaves and grass and even water bottles into the stormwater system. So it's also looking at what is maintenance, what systems need greater capacity, but really through this effort, we're able to really identify those things. Through that and the efforts in going back and updating some of the results, we're able to then work at the adaptation and mitigation strategies. Really, the ultimate goal is to end up with actionable projects that can then be identified for future funding. It's really difficult to go to a funder and say, we think this is what we need. This will help us say, this is what we need. So some examples also as we look at actions to really increase that resiliency. There's a number of adaptation strategies, but those include, and when I talk about from a regional perspective, again, water doesn't really understand those boundaries, but working together to identify, for example, regional stormwater solutions. This really brings our communities together. There's a number of different efforts going on in different jurisdictions, but this really has brought our region together to look at what you're doing, what they're doing, and then where are some efforts to not duplicate, but build upon each other's efforts. The same would be true as we look at bioswales, looking at additional landscaping, looking at erosion prevention. So a number of strategies. From a planning perspective, is we're updating comprehensive plans and land development codes, really identifying some of those additional hazard areas that we're finding from these studies, and looking at opportunities to be more resilient. And this goes hand in hand as we look at our emergency management planning and those key documents like the local mitigation strategy as we look at some hardening projects as well. And that's really just to name a few. And of course, this is an example of new home construction and where we know the first floor elevation really needs to be higher. This is an example, and of course that first floor is really, can be nicely screened but used for storage, but nothing that is really going to suffer from water damage. And of course, as we look to improve flood resiliency, I think this is something that we work as planners and folks in building to really look at opportunities to increase flood proofing, especially of new construction, and also of retrofitting existing buildings. And this is really kind of a snapshot of things in your home even, and there's a number of guides as we look at trying your best to kind of flood-proof things, raise electrical outlets, different techniques for reducing the amount of damage that you may sustain. And then from kind of an overall landscape perspective, there's other solutions. For example, as we look at stormwater and also opportunities for recreation, we have a number of new communities where some of that dry kind of floodplain compensation is there that can be used for passive recreation, but in a time of storm it actually serves as water storage as well. And just kind of a number of other examples as we really look at that more resilient future. So as I've listened, I'm really grateful for this summit. It really brings together so much critical data, but also seeing what others are doing and what that path forward is. And it really helps. I think that none of us can do this alone, so looking at the local, regional, and state efforts, and again, complementing and building upon what we're each doing. These convenings, I think, are really critical to seeing what everyone is doing, getting ideas, but also working together. Through the efforts with the adaptation action area plans, for example, the vulnerability assessments, and the resources that have been brought to the table, I think we have a much more resilient outlook. But just many thanks also to just the number of partners that I see in the room, and especially with CHNEP and their assistance. So thank you.
Great. Well, we are going to move into Menti for our final Q&A, and I know some questions have already been coming in, so please put yours in if you haven't already. We're going to move over pretty quickly, and we have roughly about 8 minutes or so. So I think, we'll start with Jennifer. How do you define community? We go to the community. What does that mean? What community? How do you engage community members to participate in that? And what efforts are you making to ensure inclusion?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Oh, goodness. Well, I wish we could do like an airdrop of flyers when we do community engagement, because as much as we do it, I feel like it's impossible to let everybody know. But we work a lot with our local governments, but then also community partners. Just kind of looking at some examples. We have different neighborhood associations, community groups. I can't think of any of them offhand, but there are a number in each county that we work to let them know of upcoming events. Also websites, newspaper posts, but really we have found that your community champions, if you can identify them, they have been a tremendous asset to get folks out. And if people cannot come out, also having interactive maps and a website for folks to provide comments.
Right, and then there is a kind of a technical question for Nicole about that someone noticed the scoring only gave natural and cultural resources a 1 on the scale. Can you explain how these different assets were weighted when we had the example of the weighting of the different assets categories?
Sure. Yeah. So the weighting of the categories sort of started with what are the assets that are going to be of most critical importance to community safety and health immediately following, a flood event, or if that facility were to flood. So, if a wastewater treatment plant, floods, that's going to have really large impacts on a large amount of people very quickly. So that would be something that would be weighted a little bit higher. So we actually used the sort of categories that are in the Resilient Florida plan and gave the categories that have like critical, like emergency facilities and that kind of thing, the highest scoring, and then moved down the list from there using the Resilient Florida sort of strategy for that.
Great. What are those publicly accessible tools that are now available for everyone to use, and also what investments of funding does the state have available for these types of projects?
So I love that question because there are so many amazing agencies at the federal, state levels. Counties are gathering a lot of information, NGOs, and they have it available through their websites. But we are trying to actively aggregate all of that onto the CHNEP Water Atlas into one place. So we're sort of the conveners of that data. You can go to the USGS website. They have started up this really amazing levels and flows tracker, but we've already pulled it onto the Water Atlas too, along with, some of the other state agency data and that kind of thing. So if you, we're trying to make it a one-stop shop for that, because a lot of these groups are making so many investments to gather that data, so we're aggregating it all into one place. So that would be a place to start. Again, there are lots of, it's so many great websites all over the place, but we wanted to aggregate it in one place because, we all have limited time and we have to sleep at some point. So, so I thank you for that question, because I want to direct people to the CHNEP Water Atlas for looking for all of that information. As far as funding, I'm going to start by answering this, but I'll also, I'm sure Jennifer has some response to this, but the Resilient Florida Grant Program is what I was referring to as well. And a lot of these counties are using some of these plans and going back and applying for additional funding to gather more data or to take next steps through that program. And I didn't know if you had anything to add there too.
I think Nicole covered it all, but as she and Jennifer were talking, I did also want to point out that some of the examples that Nicole had in her presentation, when you look at the flood modeling for Polk County, for example, the visualization of what flooding looks like, it's one thing on a map to show the blues and the water levels, but to actually show an aerial, for example, and what that potential could look like, that has a different message to the community. So with the question of how do we consider population and density and constraints, a lot of it is in getting the data out there, but getting it so folks can understand it. We all operate at the speed of light now, but when you take a second and go, oh my goodness, that's our wastewater treatment plant. And we looked at that, for example, in the city of Bartow, and post-storm Milton, the water was rising quickly, and we were very fortunate they were able to put a Tiger Dam in place, but the whole city was on alert. So if we look to the future and we look at the actual really visualization of what could be, it certainly also tells a story of where your greatest population is and where significant impacts can occur. So that probably did not answer the question, but I did want to point that out.
Great, and I think one final question that is appropriate for both of you to respond to is, in your experience, what connects most of Central and Southwest Florida?
Go ahead.
So I'm a planner. I would say everything. We are so connected as regions. Of course, we have the Peace River, but the Peace River watershed, as well as our critical infrastructure and our economies. We have a significant agricultural base, but we also have an urbanizing base. But all of that is integral to Southwest Florida. So our natural resources, our populations, our infrastructure, and it's really key that we keep the regional communication lines open as well.
So I guess I would say water is our, sort of like our purview of the connecting factor, and that drives the work that we do. Is we're working from the headwaters to the estuary, and everything that's done, at the headwaters is going to have impacts all the way down. And the water is the connector for the work that we're doing. Water quality and water flows, and the habitat that's connected to that all also sort of flow into, a lot of these resiliency aspects that we're talking about today, because, that's one of the hazards we're talking about, but it's also one of the things that's most beneficial to our communities and our quality of life and moving forward with planning.
Well, I want to thank our presenters for our final session, and we just have a few closing comments. I want to say the summit is a little bit like a chocolate box, whether, we have in the room scientists, citizens, water managers, policymakers, all coming for different reasons and looking for different things out of the summit. And I hope at the end you found some things in that chocolate box that really met your expectations and were helpful to you. It is always challenging to try to plan for such a diverse audience, but we really appreciate the time that each of you took to engage in this, because we learn so much from each other's perspectives and from interacting from people outside of our immediate sphere. And we really appreciate your participation. In closing, I just wanted to share some information on ways that you can stay informed and engaged. So just to bear with me just a couple last minutes here. If you go to the chnep.org website, we will have links to the presentation videos posted there within 2 weeks. We will also have them on the CHNEP YouTube channel. So we do encourage you to go ahead and think about colleagues or other people you work with who might be interested in some of this content, and feel free to share it with them. We want to spread the word and really build interest in this topic of resiliency year after year and see this movement grow in our region. So we encourage you to do that. In the upper right corner of the website, you can click on the subscribe button, and that will allow you to receive our free nature calendar, which has educational content as well as other communications that you can check off which ones you're interested in. If you go to our Get Involved tab, you can see a calendar of all of our upcoming CHNEP events. All of our meetings are open to the public, so we have committees of we have our Technical Advisory Committee of Scientists, we have a Citizens Advisory Committee of Community Organizations, we have a Management Committee of Natural Resource Managers, and we have a Policy Committee of Elected Leaders and Policymakers. And those meetings are held with each of those committees 3 times a year, and they're all open to the public. So anyone can come in and sit in and see the presentations, and there's even public comment opportunities at those meetings. So we encourage you to consider that, coming to those. And also you can sign up there for a monthly e-newsletter of monthly citizen science events and volunteer opportunities. We consolidate, we're like a clearinghouse for all of that from our various partners and community organizations that we keep in touch with, and we try to consolidate it and put it in a nice little e-newsletter that we send to your email box so that you can see everything going on in the next month that you might want to plug into. Also, we have a Facebook page, so you can like or follow us on Facebook. It's a great way. You'll see pictures from the summit, from all the different sessions we've had thus far that have already been posted as we've been going through these sessions. You can learn of other information, events, activities that are happening that partners in the partnership are partaking in. So encourage you to continue to look there. And then also at the bottom of the CHNP website, there is a YouTube icon. As I mentioned, we will have our videos there. You can also hit the subscribe button, and that way, as we post new content, you'll be getting a little notification. All of our public presentations at our public meetings are, the guest presentations are YouTube, so we do save those videos and share them. You can go on there and search by keywords, and you can look at an incredible amount of content from amazing experts going back years. So I encourage you to check that out as a resource. I also would like to just thank again our sponsors, our lead sponsor, the Volo Foundation, and our supporting sponsor, Sunseeker Resort, as well as all of our presenters, our incredible presenters, and the Coastal and Heartland National Estuary Partnership staff, without whom this event would not be possible, and all of you, our attendees, who took the time to attend and learn how you can help enhance resiliency in our region. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.